And I'm in a facility now where people are going up and down the hall screaming, cutting themselves. And like 6 weeks before this, I'm in Portugal. My mind cannot fathom the fall. Can't fathom the fall.
You were about to hear one of the most radical stories of human experience possible. It's a worst-case scenario that meets a nightmare on steroids. And it left me speechless and grasping for a light at the end of the tunnel. Thankfully, that light comes, but not until after one of the most harrowing journeys I've ever heard in my life. My guest today is Chris Arnold, an entrepreneur, a real estate investor, and a men's group founder. He has been extremely successful by the standards of business and financial means, only to have it come crumbling down under the weight of a lie. This lie led to a fateful night that turned into 7 months of hell within hell, and culminated in his being institutionalized, the loss of his businesses, and multiple suicide attempts. His story highlights the dangers of isolation mixed with stress, as well as the extreme dangers of benzodiazepines. The intention of this podcast is to share Chris's story in hopes that it reaches those who need to hear it before they have to go through what Chris did, as well as shed some light on the effects of extreme benzodiazepine use, the withdrawals, and an alternative treatment for them. So with that, take a deep breath and buckle up for what can only be described as intense on today's episode of the Hard for Life podcast.
You are listening to the Hard for Life podcast with Thomas Scott.
It's been 1 year from the day that we'll call it my rebirth day. And I am finally ready to tell this story, not just to my friends and family, which was the first year, but it's a story that I'm ready to tell publicly. So I wanted to wait until I was at that time in which it felt right, and it has felt right, and hitting the podcast circuit, and just so happens you're the first podcast, buddy.
What an honor. I'm getting so many firsts on this podcast, and it's my first podcast, it's my first time doing a podcast, so I'm very, very grateful and honored for that. So, but without further ado, let's dive right in. So where does this story begin?
The story begins with dishonesty. So going back to, let's say, about 2017, I had cheated on my wife at the time. Okay. And for the first time in my life, I intentionally harbored a significant secret. And that really, for me, was like the first domino that began to lead me down this path, basically of an unraveling that would go on for years, to basically a climactic implosion. And living in dishonesty, and you hold secrets, and we always hear you're as sick as your secrets, starts to change who you are. You're hiding, you're not living from a place of authenticity. There's a sense of duality, shame, guilt, right?
Yeah.
And as much as you try to suppress it and stuff it, which you have to, right? Ignore, suppress, numb, it wants to make its way out, and it will eventually. It will come out one way or the other, and unfortunately for most of us as men, it ends up coming out sideways, which is very, very destructive. And so I harbored that secret, and I got to a place in my relationship with now my ex-wife to where that led us to a place of having to go through divorce. And I've been running businesses for about 19 years, different types of real estate businesses. And after 19 years of running companies, I'm now moving into just like a place of burnout. And to give you an idea of everything that happened, this is going back to basically around 2021, 2022. I can remember I bought a company on a Friday, right? And again, anyone who's ever acquired a company, it's a hellish process. Just so happened it coincided with a community that I was running of high-achieving entrepreneurs, basically a brotherhood. And we're talking about a place for men to be vulnerable and safe. So I, as the leader, not modeling that, living in fear, all of it, right? Duality, standing in front of these guys, not telling the truth, lying it, the whole thing, right? So on that Monday, after the purchase of the company, we had our main event down here in Tulum, and that takes 5 months to plan. So this is a significant event with 50 guys and another 25 wives. So this 60-day timetable is just intensive of buying and getting ready for this. And so this is trailing off the end of 19 years as well. And what ends up happening is a few weeks later, some significant things happen in my marriage, and the divorce process starts. So now I find myself owning a new company, trying to run at that time, had a couple other companies. I'm harboring this lie, all of it. Now I'm going through the divorce. And the thing with the divorce, it's going to be public, right? So I can't hide this one, right? So I'm going to have to communicate, but try to navigate through this without basically telling, the truth of really where things went wrong. And that was me being dishonest. So go through the divorce. Very difficult. Like, my experience of that was I completely underestimated it. It's like, over 50% of people get divorced. It seems like a regular thing, but man, the loneliness I felt after being with someone for 10 years was difficult. I mean, those were dark times. So that's more draining out of me, right? In the sense of like whatever I have left in the tank. Like, so by this time, like, I'm completely burnt out. And fast forward about a year, unfortunately not being in a place to lead this new company, and all this shit is coming up after all of these years. Now I find myself in another place of this new company I bought, now beginning to spiral in the wrong direction.
Wow.
And I can remember thinking to myself, like, I don't have the bandwidth to like deal with another crisis, right? And it just felt like for the years there was just crisis after crisis.
Pile. Yeah.
And I remember I was in Portugal, and I was getting away from everything for a couple weeks just to breathe. But I had this call with my COO at the time and my business consultant. And we had a plan to like navigate through the end of the year. And basically there was a substantial person that was leaving that was going to be taking revenue with them. And we thought we could navigate it. But on that call, my business consultant just spoke straight truth to me. And he said, Chris, I know we thought we could navigate this by the end of the year. But bro, if you wait, it's going to be an absolute fucking nightmare. And if you sell now, it's going to be really bad. So you need to consider selling. And I remember hanging up that phone in Portugal, and I remember like this set in. I can do this. There's nothing left. Yeah. And now I have to undertake what's going to be one of the biggest business processes I've gone through. On top of this, I'm completely humiliated, embarrassed, because this was a public purchase within my real estate industry. And I'm so caught up in my identity tied to this thing. I feel like I'm going from hero to zero. And at this point in my life, it is way over affecting me. So the financial loss that I'm going to take on top of like this reputational loss that I'm perceiving that I'm going to have. So I get back home, and basically for a few weeks, I lock myself up and start the negotiation of the sell, and have to go back to the previous owner with my tail between my legs. And luckily he's a great friend and very gracious. But now we got to go through this process, and selling a company is even harder than buying it from some extent, because now my team of 10, 12 years is getting broken up. I have single moms on the phone crying that they're losing their job, we're losing our family, and like the shame and guilt being the point leader of all this, and feeling like everything I'm watching built for all these 19 years and, elevating from one level to the next, it's just all unraveling. So I start dealing with anxiety at a level that I've never had before. So just so happens that the last week of the sale of the company coincides with a trip to Honduras with my brotherhood to basically go do a philanthropic building project that we raise money for. Coincidentally. I don't want to go to Honduras because I'm already starting to have massive anxiety and try to deal with the sale of a company, being out in the jungle while trying to do a building project and host all of these guys that don't want to go. I tell the guys, and the guys, out of support, said, come, be here with us. We'll set everything up for you. We'll support you in the process. Don't isolate, right? We know this. Brother, we always talk about it. The worst thing you do is isolate. So I go. So when I get there, it's like I basically unravel. Imagine watching like a survival film where someone's been out in the woods surviving, and then all of a sudden like help comes and they like collapse because they've been holding it together. Yeah. Basically what happened when I saw my boys. And these guys are guys I've known for long periods of time. These are my brothers. And I start going into full like shaking. And I can't basically sit still. I'm like pacing a restaurant, making a scene. And my brain like loses decisiveness. I become extremely indecisive. I can't make decisions. So basically at this point, I'm experiencing severe anxiety attacks. What do you do? what do? We're in Honduras. We need to do something, right? So the idea is, hey, we think the best thing to do is to get some anti-anxiety medicine. So go to the Honduras pharmacy and get some Xanax. Western mindset, right? Take a pill.
Yep.
Again, I'm not saying that there's not a place for that, right? But that's the way that we think, right? So I take it, and unfortunately, who knows what the fuck was in it, right? It's Honduras. And I'm not prescribed an amount, so I'm taking whatever I think I should take, which if I were to give my best guess might be 2 to 3 times the amount. So doctor might have prescribed me half a pill. I'm taking like first day a pill, then getting up to like a pill and a half, right? So it's not a lot, but it is 2 to 3 times. 48 hours, I go into onset depression. So I start to have an adverse effect to the prescription. Within about 4 days, I'm up on the roof working, finalizing the sale of the company, and I think I go into having a vision from God. I don't understand that I am now going into what's called a benzos hallucination. I'm dehydrated, I'm on the roof, I'm taking too much medication, and obviously I'm completely, like, from a nervous system standpoint, already spent.
Yeah.
So I'm on the roof and I start having this hallucination, and a benzos hallucination is interesting for me, my experience. It's not visual, it's not auditory like verbal, but it's basically like moving to an observing position in your body, and basically there's an inner voice and dialogue that you're listening to.
Wow.
Now, I come from a Christian upbringing, so I have a theological background, so it's going through my theology bucket, and I think that basically this is like God having a come to Jesus meeting with me.
Yep.
The first thing I hear is, there's absolutely no way out of this situation, Chris. Your life is done. It's over. Now, I knew the way out, but benzos, and let me describe benzodiazepine, I will use the word benzos, are Valium, Xanax, Klonopin, Ativan. That is the benzos family, primarily taking for anxiety, or a lot of times people that have difficulty sleeping. So most people have heard of this. So as I'm taking it and it's exacerbating my situation, I believe there's no way out. My life is completely over. It's not true. It's the benzos. I don't know that it's the benzos. And as I tell you this story, I will not know that all of this is an experience of benzos till 7 months later.
Wow.
So after that, my life starts to kind of play before my eyes, right? Like I start to see pictures. And this self-hatred and condemnation sets in. And I basically start to sense and feel as my life's playing out that I'm and this is the key word that I heard, and I've heard other people hear this on benzo, I'm an absolute fraud. Everything I've done out of my life has been out of ill will, completely. And basically, like, I think that God's like revealing my sin to me, right? Like, this to come to Jesus. And then the next thing that happens, for the first time in my life, I have no mental health issues previously, never been on prescription drugs in my life. I start having massive suicidal ideations on the roof.
Wow.
Basically, I hear when you get back to Tulum, it's like marching orders. You're going to go back to Tulum and take your life. So I go to bed that night. We have one last day on the building project. The cell's done, and I'm out in the sun all day. Now, people are asking, like, maybe as you're listening, well, what were your brothers doing? They didn't know what to do. I'm completely removed from them. They're freaking out. They don't know what's going on. You know, they're trying to approach me, but basically, like, I'm shutting down. But again, in my mind, I'm just like, I'm circumstantially depressed. Like, I don't think this has anything to do with the drug that I'm taking. I'm just like, man, I'm really fucked up from the situation. So they're doing the best they can to navigate it. And so I go out on the next day, and the benzos hallucination kicks in, but it's even worse. And basically, the climax of that hallucination was, there is Hitler, and then there is you, Chris, second to Hitler.
Wow.
Clear as day. And I absorb and I believe all of this, right? But this is what benzos do. And then I hear, you're not going to wait till you go back to Tulum. You're going to go... It's interesting. I've told this story so many times that the emotion has come out of it over you, but the emotion's coming back, which is interesting.
Thank you.
You'll go back tonight and you'll swallow the 2 to 3 boxes of pills you have, and you'll get in a pool to kill yourself. Make sure it's done. So I did. Swallowed 2-3 boxes of benzos, got in a pool, blacked out, and woke up the next day at a Honduras hospital. Luckily, at whatever time it was in the middle of the night, even though I'm in a not remembering blacked out state, luckily, a guy that was there heard me thrashing around in the pool and pulled me out of the pool. So when I wake up in a Honduras hospital, that's how I got there. They pulled me out of the pool, took me there, pumped my stomach, and I wake up, and it's me and the other guys needed to move on to Rotan because that was the next part of the trip. We build, and then we go to Rotan for like the last 2-3 days vacation. So I'm in the hospital with one of my closest friends and part of the brotherhood. And I remember waking up, and man, the shame and guilt like hit me. Like I just tried to take my life on my own brotherhood trip while building a church in Honduras. Like, fuck. And I carry all the shame and guilt of that because at the time, I don't know this has anything to do with benzos. Just, I made the decision, right?
Yeah.
So obviously I have a great network of people, a lot of type A personalities. So this spreads like wildfire and, everyone wants to come and help, right? So they get me back home to Dallas after they check me out of the hospital. And I get back to Dallas and I'm with my brother who wakes me up in the morning. And basically when I wake up, my body is convulsing. I can't formulate sentences. And so basically I'm talking to my brother and I'll be like, I'll say his name and I'll be like, and I just stare off. And so obviously my brother's like, well, what do we do? So let's wait a few days and like, we don't know what happened. Like, there's variables at this point, right? Like maybe it's the benzos. We don't know anything about benzodiazepine. What happens if you take 50, 60 benzos, right? How long was I underwater, right? Like, did something affect my brain? Mental breakdown, which then becomes the belief, like Chris had a mental breakdown. So this goes on for a few days, and basically I'm in this state, and my brother sits me down and is like, we love you. The plan was to send you to your parents, but we got to send you to doctors because we don't know how to handle this. So where do you send someone, right? So start talking around amongst the community, and what comes up is, hey, there's this place to go to in Phoenix, and it's basically one of these catch-all luxury rehabilitation centers. Doesn't matter if you got codependency, PTSD, alcohol, sex addiction, whatever. They got it all, right? And it's one of the top in the country. So they ship me there, and when I get there, when I wake up in the morning, my body is convulsing and I can't formulate sentences. And they ask me, what's wrong? I don't know what's wrong. You tell me what's wrong. It's why I'm here, right? And so they say, well, what we need to do is get you in to see a psychiatrist as quickly as possible. So I go in and I sit down with the psychiatrist. And within about 20 to 30 minutes, I walk out on about 5 prescription drugs. Never been on prescription drugs in my life. Lithium, Prozac, Baclofen, antipsychotics. It works, right? So at this point, now I'm on all this other medication, so we have more variables. But here's where the shit went sideways. Somehow, some way. And I want to be cautious as I speak about this because, again, different things and experiences happen at different rehabilitation centers, et cetera. I can just give you my experience. Some people's lives have been changed by them. Unfortunately, in my situation, what happened was the one thing they didn't continue me on was a benzos. Now, the Honduras doctor left me with Klonopin, but when I went into the place and they were given the prescription for Klonopin from the Honduras doctor, and obviously they know my story, for whatever reason, I don't know why they didn't continue me on benzos. So now I'm going to begin the gradual stint of what are called benzos withdrawals. To put this into perspective, benzos withdrawals are worse than heroin withdrawals.
Wow.
So what ends up happening for some people is basically when you begin to get off, your neurotransmitters stop firing. So basically the word is, and the way I express it is, you can't function. You can't function. Now, everyone is behind me, rooting me on from a family, friend standpoint. Like, we're going to send Chris off. We're going to hold the bit. Like, everyone's fighting for Chris, right? Come back, new man. Everyone's rooting me. He's going to be better. The love, all of it, getting it from the community. Well, unfortunately, what happens is, like, I can't go to group. I don't leave my room because I'm going into a benzos withdrawal. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, the psychiatrist did not view it and understand that it was benzos withdrawal. He thought it was a lack of effort. And this is communicated to my family. So basically, I'm on the phone at the time with my brothers like, bro, do the work. Do the work. So I'm on psych watch. I have someone follow me around, writing everything I do every 15 minutes. I remember there were a couple nights where they put someone in my bedroom, laying in bed in benzos withdrawal, not at home with my family in bed, but in some place where no one hears me, and every 15 minutes I hear a click of a pen from some stranger in a dark corner writing down. Like, it's freaking rocket fuel on paranoia.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so basically they sit me down and I keep trying to work through this with them and so forth. And basically they sit me down and I'm like, Chris, here's the deal. You have, and we're diagnosing you with severe depression, severe anxiety, and psychosis. Now, I'm doctors telling me this, and I come from a world and a family where trust the doctors, take the medication, right?
Yep.
They wear a white coat, you trust them. This is what my family's taking.
Yep.
But even though I'm taking all these prescription drugs, it's affecting this benzos withdrawal that I'm going through. So basically, after about a week, I am, and this is not a lie, the most feared person in this place. I'm like, by nature, very gregarious.
Yeah.
Right? I'm walking down and girls are two-stepping me because they're scared of what's going to happen to me. Like, is this guy going to snap? What the fuck is he going to do in this place? And I'm the only person on psych watch out of 125, 150 people. And let me remind you, this is a rehabilitation center, right? So
Yeah.
I'm that guy, right?
Yeah.
And basically, like, people won't look me in the eye. And, like, I get known, like, as the person there is not willing to do the work. And I remember the hardest thing I had to do is I wouldn't leave my room, but I had to eat. And I remember for a few days, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I'd have to take this walk of shame from my bedroom all the way to the cafeteria to get food, bro. And it fucking broke me.
I bet.
People wouldn't look me in the eye. Got some military guys in there, and I could just see them look at me and just basically like shake their head. And I feel like the biggest pussy in the world. Not showing up. I'm not doing the work. Like, what's wrong with me? Shame, 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 guilt, guilt, guilt. So after about a week of this, they want me out of here, right? Like, basically I'm disrupting this entire rehabilitation center. And so the guy sits me down, the psychiatrist, and he said, Chris, two things are not happening. You're not staying here, and you're not going home. We're going to two-man escort you to a higher level facility. Wow. I'm in 1 week, and now I'm being removed from a rehabilitation center to a higher level facility. Well, now we're about 7 days in, so I'm going to now be moving into what's referred to as acute state withdrawal. At this point, my mind starts to generate a hallucination that will go on for 2 weeks, that they're not sending me to a place to get well, but they're sending me there to the FBI to go to prison for the rest of my life. And I remember that car ride, watching the sunset, being two-man escorted. This is the last sunset I was ever going to see. Doesn't matter if it's real or not. Your body believes it, your emotion believes it, your mind believes it. So when I get there and go through the check-in process, I didn't even think they were going to check me in. I thought the FBI was going to be out front. So I remember going in, and now I hit insomnia state. So basically, I don't sleep for 4 days, and I'm not leaving my room, and I'm just waiting for them to hand me over to the FBI. And I can remember at one point, the new psychologist came in and said, Chris, let's go for a walk outside. She walks me out in the heat. Again, I now know heat and benzos don't mix because it happened twice. And I'm looking over my shoulder, and she's like, why are you so paranoid? Like, what are you fearful of? And I could only make one lap around this track. And basically, I guess all the stamina, like a walk around this track in the sun. And when I go back in, it's like the whole thing, like the way people are sitting and standing, that it's full-blown sting operation. All the patients are undercover FBI. I literally go sit across the table from the guy that looks like he's in charge, and I look at him and I go, what do I need to do? How do I hand myself over? And he's just a patient. He looks at me and goes, I don't know. What do you think you should do? I think he's just an FBI guy fucking with me. So basically, I'm telling them for weeks, what do I need to do to cooperate? I now am in my room. I don't like leaving my room because down the hall are all the FBI agents. It becomes so exacerbated that basically I believe that they're filming everything that I am doing, and that there is basically news crews outside, a helicopter media like above us, and this is being broadcasted to the world. And my friends are like, turn on CNN. Chris is part of a sting operation. This goes on for like 2 weeks. Basically, each morning I wake up and I pace my room 4 steps forward, 4 steps to the right, 3 steps up to the bathroom, back. I would walk it so many times barefooted, even though they cleaned it, it turned into this film. All I could do. And I could basically know what time of day it was based on how much sun came through like the shades of the window that were closed. So I don't want to go down water to get haul, so I'm drinking water out of the hydrant, which isn't good for me out of the faucet. And basically it turns into a thing of like the worst loop I've ever been in, where basically I walk for 10 minutes and basically urinate every 15 minutes because I'm dehydrated for days. And I'm in a facility now where people are going up and down the hall screaming, cutting themselves. And like 6 weeks before this, I'm in Portugal. My mind cannot fathom the fall. Can't fathom the fall. So at that point, they sit me down, and even though I'm telling them what I need to do to cooperate, they're basically saying you need to take this medication. And this medication is called Ativan. I'm not thinking about Ativan, but Ativan is the strongest benzos that you can take.
Oh my God.
So I take the medication because I want to cooperate, because I can't really communicate. And I believe at this point, the world literally hates me because they're watching me waste taxpayer dollars. So I take the medication, but they give me too much. And I turn into Dennis the Menace. Literally it was like I took 10 shots of tequila. I'm running around the facility throwing paper wads. I smacked a nurse on the ass.
Wow.
And at this point, now I think they're giving me a truth serum. And they're doing this to make a mockery of me to the prosecution because all this is being videoed. So now we go into about a 5-day standoff in my room because they want me to take the medication. I do not. So they're coming in 2 by 2 every few hours, repeating, take the medication, take the medication. They can't force it in your mouth, but they can basically put you against the wall, put it in your hand, and try to force your hand to your mouth. I'm not going to take it. Now, again, in my mind, they're trying to fuck me over. In their mind, they're trying to save my life. These people are just trying to help me, right? So after about 5 days, I'm going back into withdrawal again from the Ativan, so I negotiate to take half. Because I remembered when I started coming down, I was functioning okay. And here's what happens. When you get off benzos, if your brain doesn't pick back up the firing of your neurotransmitters, you basically get fucking stuck. Like you can't function. You can take a benzos and immediately your brain comes back online.
Wow.
Like that, because your neurotransmitters are firing.
Yeah.
So I negotiate to take half, and it puts me at a balanced state. And the way that I came out of the actual benzos hallucination was the fact that the therapist, not psychiatrist I had, came in one day and she looked at me. I hadn't been touched in weeks. They don't touch you in these facilities. She literally looked at me and she stopped being a doctor and she started being a mom. I'll never forget. And she started crying. She put her arms around me. And she said, Chris, the FBI is not after you. We're here to help you. And the sincerity in her eyes planted this seed. And for the next 48 hours, I could unravel that this was a hallucination in my brain. And it's like watching The Sixth Sense. That's the way I can describe it. You get to the end and you realize Bruce Willis is dead, and they start replaying scenes and you realize you misinterpreted everything. That's basically was my experience of Benzo's hallucination at that level. Wow. So at this point, I want the fuck out of this place. So I manipulate, I lie, I tell them whatever I can to get out of this place. But before you go, Chris, we're going to send you with all the prescriptions except the Ativan. We need to taper you off of it. And we're going to do it in 7 days, which is ludicrous. So they taper me off Ativan in 7 days, the strongest benzos. put me on a plane and send me home to my family.
Wow.
No one has any idea what come next. Because by the time I get home, I'm not withdrawing off Xanax. I'm withdrawing off Ativan. I'm on the fetal position in my parents' house. I'm screaming. It feels like my brain is bleeding. And basically, what could have happened, worst case scenario, which felt like it, is I could have gone into seizures and died.
Wow.
And I was completely suicidal because biologically I can't handle it. My parents don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Who knows what to do? What do? Send him to another facility. So sit me down. At this point, like, there's no dignity left in my life. My brother has power of attorney. They have formed a board of directors for my life. And I basically am like a 5-year-old just grabbing on to, at this point in my life, my stepmom, because my mom died when I was 18. I'm like a 5-year-old. And they say, we want to send you to another home for mental breakdowns and in Florida this time. Nope. Not going to do it. And then it becomes this battle. But then my family trying to help me. Not going to go. Well, Chris, you can't stay here because nothing's going to happen here. Oh, and I was so fucked up. I had resumed to the fact that I could live on my parents' couch for the rest of my life. I got 3 meals a day and I could watch Netflix. Literally, that's where my mind was at. Yeah. I could somewhat make this my life. Literally, that's where I was at.
Wow.
So I said, I'm not going to do that. And they said, sit down with the board of directors and tell them what you're going to do. These are close friends of mine. And I said, I'm going back to Tulum. And at that point, all hell broke loose. You're just going back to kill yourself. And unfortunately, Americans, when it comes to, certain areas of the world and so forth, Tulum among my family is seen a particular way, right? It's cartel. It's not a good, healthy place for you, right? It's party. That is a part of Tulum, but that is not the essence of Tulum.
It's not the essence of Tulum. Yeah.
So I tell them I'm getting back on a plane. And at that point, this goes on as fights, but basically it's like, you're 43 years old. We can't tell you what to do. And so basically, I book a flight, they drive me to the airport, and I didn't want to leave because I would have been happy staying there, but they needed me to make a decision. So it took 45 minutes to coerce me out of the car, and then basically out of love, they drove away.
Wow.
So I get on a plane and go back to Tulum. So I get back to Tulum.
Wow.
I don't tell anyone's here. Mind you, I'm still on 5 prescription medications, and I'm still in benzos withdrawal. So for the first week, I don't tell anyone. And I'm basically pacing this house, trying to figure out a way to kill myself. And all kinds of scenarios, like trying to kill yourself is extremely frustrating and difficult if you've never actually had to do it. Well, there's this guy, right? I know how to do shit. Like, super fucking frustrating when you start going down every road. Well, what about this? What about that?
Yeah.
So basically, I come to the decision that, okay, I'm going to repeat what I did before. I'm going to go and I'm going to buy some Xanax from the pharmacy, but this time I'm going to take a paddleboard out in the ocean, eat the whole thing, and when I fall off, I'll drown and die. So I go to the pharmacy, I take the Xanax, and I'm sitting there, and before I know it, like, I start just texting a friend, like normal. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, my brain's come back on, but I don't understand what's happening, right? Like, what is going on? So I do that, and I end up connecting with a girl that I dated, who's basically a medicine woman, and she's a medium, right? And I feel like if anyone that's going to understand the craziness of this situation is going to be her, because of what she's dealt with and what she's been through. And so I go to her and I tell her what happened, and basically I'm in a state of I'm going to take more drugs. I want to get out of this state. So I remember I took ecstasy. And thank God I did, because ironically, ecstasy is a serotonin reuptake.
Wow.
Which is basically the thing my brain needed. Now, it's providing too much for my brain.
Yeah.
But it's enough not to make me feel high, but basically make me feel completely normal, without pain. So I can remember, I didn't sleep that night. I even went to a friend's house to have a get together and was talking to people. And that morning, I was going to kill myself, right? Not telling people, but this girl knows, right? And I wake up the next day and I haven't slept, sorry I didn't. And I even popped on a meeting for the Brotherhood. I just showed up and I'm like, hey guys, because I'm I'm functioning. Hey, it's good to see you, blah, blah, blah. But of course it wears off and I go back into benzos withdrawal. So at this point, I bring in a friend of mine who is a naturopathic doctor. And she looks at the situation and she's like, all right, let's see if we can holistically get you off this. Vitamins, minerals, all of it. I'm able to get off all the prescriptions, but the two things that I'm not being able to kick is the benzos and the ecstasy. And I tried it, bro. I tried everything. Alcohol, psilocybin, none of that shit worked.
Yeah.
For some reason this is working. I don't know why, but it's keeping me alive. And we go through that process, but I can't get off. And the benzos withdrawals I'm cutting down is getting worse. And it culminates because I think it's a good idea to go get an IV. And I get an IV and it flushes out of my system and it sends me into 5 days of horror in my room.
Wow.
Basically, I have a life assistant that basically kind of takes care of my house, is literally laying in a bed taking care of me for 5 days, just stroking my back. So at this point, I'm like, screw that. I'm going to go back on this route that I have. And all I know is this concoction of, benzos and ecstasy is working for me. So I go into a vicious cycle of the only way I know to stay alive is to take ecstasy, stay awake for 3 to 4 days without sleeping, take a Valium, basically a benzos, to go to sleep, right? Because that's what you do to help you sleep, not understanding that I'm basically resetting the cycle. Because at this point, I'm convinced that I'm permanently disabled because we're now months into the process. So here's the hell within the hell. The hell within the hell is I didn't understand I was in benzos withdrawal. I thought that basically I got brain damage from being underwater too long.
Wow.
So I think I'm permanently fucked up like this for the rest of my life. You believe you're okay, but as months go by, you fully get convinced. So at this point, I push everyone out of my life, everyone except this medicine woman. And she drops her life, and for 3.5 months, she takes care of me. I develop agoraphobia. I can't leave my house, right? And basically, I'm staying up for 4 days, going to sleep, waking up in a benzos withdrawal, trying to ride that out as long as I can because I can't stay on ecstasy to just reset the cycle. Dude, I get completely what's the word I'm looking for? Loss of weight. Sorry, the word is slipping my mind. But basically, my organs start shutting down. I can't leave the house. This is not, my body's breaking down. So we're 7 months into the process now in this state. And I've lost my sanity. I'm out of my mind. And the whole time, I had a gun with bullets.
Wow.
No one knew. But my deal was I will get whatever life I can with this girl that I'm staying with and taking care of me. And then when I can't take anymore, I'll just kill myself. That's the plan, right? And that'll be clean this time. So that gun sat with bullets in my house every day. At 7-month mark, she sits me down because she's been taking care of me for 3.5 months, and she's now at her end. And she's an absolute saint and angel. Most people lasted a week or two. She lasted 3.5 months, and she stayed centered the whole time. She held space for me for 3.5 months. Dropped her life. She sat me down. She said, Chris, I don't believe you're permanently disabled. Been doing some research and with a mentor that taught me everything I know about, because she serves plant medicine, combo, ayahuasca. Now you got to understand. No, I live in Tulum. I am stiff-arming the woo-woo world, right?
Yeah.
Cool, but I'm here for the beach and the Caribbean life and the flip-flops. I'm not here for the woo-woo. And she says, we believe that you're in a state of benzos withdrawal, and if you microdose half a teaspoonful of ayahuasca, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it will save your life. Wow. You're full of shit. I laughed.
Yeah.
You're out of it. You're going to throw some Tulum ayahuasca.
Yeah.
I am permanently fucked up. We've been like this for 7 months. You're kidding me. But two things. A, there's no other option on the table.
Yeah.
And B, if I don't do this, she's out the door and I'm grabbing that gun and it's game over.
Yeah.
So I do it for her. And I tell her, swear to me that when we go into my bedroom and I stop taking the benzos and the ecstasy, that you don't leave my side. And we go in my room, in this house that I'm sitting in right now, my bedroom. And for the first 6 days, I go through the most god-awful experience of my life. My body is contorting. The pain is so bad that I'm passing out and I'm disassociating.
Wow.
And I started beating myself in the face. I never understood why people do that. I was beating myself in the face. I was delirious. I didn't know what was happening at times. I didn't understand. I was just crying. And about the 6th day, and for whatever reason, I didn't go back and grab the drugs that were in the top of my closet that I could have taken, thank God. I pass out and I wake up and I'm lucid for 90 minutes. 90 minutes. I can hold a conversation with this girl. And for his first time, it sets in hope. Because I can tell you the darkest place that I ever experienced in my life. People use this word, but I'm saying to experience is complete and utter hopelessness. Most god-awful experience of my life is to feel that way. I had a little hope.
Wow.
90 minutes, why not 3 hours? Sure enough, from day 7 to day 15, my health doubled every day. And by day 15, I was completely cured. Obviously, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. The girl taking care of me had difficulty believing it, that it worked that fast. And neurologically, I will explain basically what I understand what happened is basically benzos take over the firing of your neurotransmitters. I took a very specific ayahuasca called diame ayahuasca. And ayahuasca, for people that don't understand that or are listening, is basically a brew that comes from the Amazonian forest, mixing a couple plants, a vine and so forth together. And it creates this brew, which is basically a psychedelic. And this particular ayahuasca acted as a mediator between my brain and the benzos. And it passed the baton back so that my brain would pick back up the firing of the neurotransmitters. It was a mediator. Not the only one that's happened to, because luckily, and here's the craziness of this whole story in the sense of divine, the person that mentored the lady that was taking care of me has done this for hundreds and hundreds of people in Costa Rica. And the very medicine I needed, which is diame ayahuasca, because I don't know, it's diame ayahuasca, and twins are very specific, happens to be sitting in the fridge of the girl that's taking care of me for months from her being down in Brazil.
Wow.
Literally in her fridge.
Wow.
It's there. So I pop out of it, and I'll pause there because at that point, the awakening begins, and it changes my life forever.
Wow.
So that's the story. But obviously the most value is and what comes next.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. You know, what's so incredible for me in hearing this story is I know this story because I was with Indy the day after the pool. And I was holding space for her while she was experiencing that situation with you.
Did you not know?
I had no idea it was you. I had no idea it was you.
Yeah, it's me.
Wow. I'm so grateful you're still here, brother. So grateful.
Yeah. Me too. Me too.
Yeah. Man, that's the most radical story I've ever heard.
Pretty fucking radical.
That's the most radical story I've ever heard.
Usually the response is, when is the Netflix movie coming out?
1,000%. Yeah, 1,000%. And to see you here, lucid. I mean, you and I, it's amazing. Just so the listener knows, you and I have had intense business conversations recently. So you were at that not very long ago.
I can tell you when it was. I got well April 15th of 2023. So technically 1 year ago.
1 year ago.
I took my last dose of ayahuasca, 12 months.
That's amazing. And I had met you right before that experience. And I want to really set that into the listener before we go into the healing of it. You were, what I hear is at an entire full psychotic breakdown from, of course, benzo withdrawal and what you just shared, less than a year ago.
Yeah.
And I imagine there are other human beings that are in a similar place still right now that won't ever come back from that. And I experience you as fully back from that, and I'm excited to see how that story plays out. But I just want to really like set the listener in who doesn't know you. Like I've gotten incredible business advice from you here just recently, and you're like stronger than ever. And so I'm very excited to hear where this goes. So please, I'm on the edge of my seat right now. I would love to know, how do you come back from something like that? So you said you had this moment with the ayahuasca at day 15, where you both experienced a miraculous. Would you call it a miracle at this point?
No, this has happened for hundreds of people. It's very practical and scientific.
So, wow. So it's not even
it's not a miracle. No, it's not a miracle. This is a way to one way to get off benzos.
Wow. And it's illegal, by the way, in the United States, right?
Ayahuasca?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay.
Ayahuasca is legal under the fact that it's used as a sacrament in churches. So people are setting up churches, which are easy to set up. Church can be anything, and it can be taken in the U.S. You can do now ayahuasca legally in the U.S. under the right.
Amazing. You said that there was an awakening that happened at that moment. Share with me, what was that awakening?
The awakening was I would describe as liberation, as freedom.
Yeah.
My whole life, my value, my identity, my need for validation was coming from all of these things in my life that no longer existed.
Yeah.
Value from my businesses, from my roles within those businesses, from my financial status, from my reputation. It was all stripped. So there was nothing that I could draw value from anymore because it was all gone.
Yeah.
All gone. But in that, I experienced a massive liberation because I think anyone that's listening doesn't practically understands that we shouldn't draw our value from these things.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is to know that versus experience it.
Yeah.
And as they say, the longest journey a man has to take is from his head to his heart.
Yeah.
And I experienced that. I experienced this liberation of not needing to draw validation from those things anymore. And in that, I began to find value and understand that value cannot be built on things that can be taken away from me anymore.
Yeah.
And that was a huge revelation. And what that ended up leading me to a place was, and what this story ended up being a story about, is once that was removed, which is removing fundamentally fear. Once the fear was subsided and removed, it allowed me for the first time to operate from a place of authenticity. Because now I can be myself.
Yeah.
I can be who I am rather than hiding and lying and being a chameleon based on what room I'm in. There was incongruency in my life, but that incongruency came from a place of fear that if people see who I am, they'll reject me. They won't love me. I won't be able to lead. It was all fear.
Yeah.
And that liberation within itself and the awakening of that particular piece was I began to be able to wake up every day and just be me after 43 years of my life, showing up. And we all go through this process, how our family needs us to show up, because we have to show up that way when we're children because we depend on the family structure. In order to survive, we have to basically adjust our persona to fit into that. We adjust our persona to fit into the world, and whatever we're doing is this constant adjustment to fit in, for fear of not belonging, for fear of not succeeding. And I found myself on the other side, like liberated from that for the first time. And that within itself was one of the greatest gifts that I got.
Wow.
And then the real journey began. How did I get there? How did I get into a performance-based esteem that my value is based on how well I perform? When my businesses are good, come talk to me. My esteem is great. When 2008 hits or other market drops or shit happens in my life, come talk to me. My esteem is down. And this is the roller coaster, and I'll speak specifically because my tribe is entrepreneurs. This is the roller coaster ride of the entrepreneur. We are high achievers. The question is why? Why are we driving ourselves to this extent? Now, we say all types of bullshit. I'll give you one big one. I'm doing it from my family. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Your family doesn't want presence. They want your presence. And you are operating and doing this thing and putting in all these hours, convincing yourself that you're doing it for them, when in reality, you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
So if you were to break that down in an understanding of what it has, let me give you my view of basically the journey that men, I'm going to speak particularly to men, right? Because that's my tribe. It also applies to women as well. But basically, here's the journey. There are behaviors, if you're listening, that you have in your life right now. And they're behaviors that you don't like. And you feel shame and you feel guilt for having these behaviors. You don't know why you do what you do, why you drink alcohol, why you overeat food, why you're a workaholic, why you binge out and watch Netflix, why you're addicted to porn, all of these things. First thing I would tell you is the question is, as Gabor Mate would say, the question is not why the behavior, why the pain?
Yeah.
To understand that we judge people for these behaviors, not understanding that they're wanting to do those things, they're doing them for pain relief. And how can we judge people for the fact that they want relief from pain? Pain. What is the pain? The pain is coming from some type of childhood trauma, childhood wound, or if you understand epigenetics and the fact that trauma travels, you can be dealing with pain, sensations, and behaviors in your body that aren't even fucking yours, that pop up in your life around the same age that the person previously in your family history did not deal with them. You want to hear something crazy about mine? My grandfather committed suicide when he was 45 years old. My mom committed suicide when she was 45. I tried a suicide attempt when I was 43.
Wow.
It's not a coincidence. Not a coincidence.
No.
So we have these pains and these sensations, but we live in this hyper-masculine world as Americans. Isolate. Man the fuck up. In the name of whatever we think we need to do, become the lone wolf, do what you need to do, hustle, grind, read all the fucking books, all of it, push through, persevere, all of it. You live that life and you continue to do it, and you suppress, you ignore, you numb. And bro, eventually your body's gonna speak to you and then it's gonna fucking scream at you.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you start getting a little bit older and shit like depression starts popping up. And anxiety, and you don't know why you have it, right? And if you wait long enough, it'll start coming up in physical ailments, chronic fatigue syndrome, autoimmune disorder, right? Your body is screaming at you. There is undealt with energy and trauma in your body that needs to be dealt with. Fortunately, in America, what do? Go to the doctor.
Take a pill.
And we take a pill, and it deals with the symptoms, but it doesn't deal with the root. So basically, you have a choice. Stay on medication for the rest of your life, which is basically America. This is how the pharmaceutical industry is built. We don't need you to get well. We need you to get dependent, right? But underneath that trauma, what I've come to learn is a radical core belief, a core sentence, if you will, that's basically driving most of your behavior, and it drove my behavior for 43 years. And that sentence, that core belief, is somewhat of a version that is, I'm not enough. I'm not enough. Mine specifically is, I'm inadequate. I'm inadequate. all the striving, all the driving in life, all the pushing through and everything I was doing was coming from this core belief that I'm not enough. I'm not enough. Dictated my entire life. Most of the decisions we were making are unconscious, not conscious. And most of the unconscious decisions we're making are being driven by this sentence. So my journey was to get in and to understand this is the driver that led me to push myself. Here's the thing. I got to take responsibility for everything in my life that led me up to a place that I'm in Honduras and I need to take Xanax. That shit's on me. Now, what happened after I put that pill in my mouth? Out of my control. So there is a part of this story that I have massive accountability for.
Yeah.
I drove myself to that point. That's on me. And what drove me to that point was that core belief.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I feel shy to share a small story that's happening in my life right now, but it's coming up, and I imagine it'll help some viewer relate to what you just shared. This morning, and my girlfriend doesn't even know this, I drained my bank account entirely. It's empty.
That's radical honesty. I like it. Let's go there.
Yeah. I have more money coming in, but there will be a few days where it's really, really thin. And every decision I made to get to this point has been extremely aligned. It was just expense after expense that came in that has led me to a certain place. And I kept holding out this faith that another client's going to come in, another blah, 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 blah. And I've got money coming in, but in this moment when we're having this conversation, that just happened like about an hour before this. And immediately when I did it, because I had to pay a certain amount of money that I was trying to hold on for an extra couple days for that next client check to come in, it was out of integrity for me to hold any longer. So I made the payment. And I immediately, enormous fear thoughts came in, self-worth thoughts came in, all these kinds of things. And what is coming through from you having shared this is this, like right after, I let all of that go, and I just have unbelievable proud and love for myself. Like, it's just I cried afterward. Like, I cried today because like I sat down, I did it, and then a hummingbird, like right after I did it, I let go of all of those fear thoughts. A hummingbird flew right up in my window and just started like flying around in circles around my window, and I just started crying from gratitude. And I imagine if I was trapped in the old identities and in the old paradigm of self-worth and in the old feelings of inadequacy, I would have crumbled under the weight of what I've just done financially. And in reality, I am taking so much pride in how I'm like handling it with such ease and grace and love. And my self-worth is actually going up because of my perspective towards this move. And as men, our identity is so attached to our financial status in a lot of ways and a lot of other things, you know, how good we are in bed. And
I'm going to give you a framework for that.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I learned this, and I'm really grateful for the understanding of it. In American culture, as boys, we go through 3 measurement processes. They're called the 3 B's. The first time we realize that we don't measure up as boys is on the ball field when we start picking teams. We realize that there's a sense of inadequacy, but we live in a society within the US that early developmental value is based on athletics.
Wow.
High school football, soccer. It's the way the system is built. So I have to deal with this measurement. And if you're great at it, then that part of your life feels a lot better. And if you're not good at sports, you don't know where you fit in, because that's the measure of your value as a young boy within the United States. Then as we get older, sports become less important, and we move to the second B, which is called the bedroom. Now we measure ourselves as men by our prowess and our ability to win women over. And in college, in the 20s, this is the measurement and the men who stand out the most. Who can win the woman? And it shifts.
Yeah.
And then it graduates into the last B that will be the measurement for most men until the day that they die. And that's the bank account.
Yeah.
And that is the process we go through in the measurement of ourselves with men within the American society that we are in. And unfortunately, it's a system. And we don't even see it. It's like being a fish in water. All we know is we feel like shit and we don't measure up. But that's the system. And we go back to what I said before. Security is building your life on something that cannot be taken away from you.
Yeah.
Because in my situation, when everything got destroyed, I got destroyed.
Yeah.
And one of the best things that I understand through a therapist that I worked with that said it to me 50 times on psilocybin, actually, Chris, you're not what you have. You're not what you do. You're not what they think. Chris, you're not what you have. You're not what you do. You're not what they think. And you embrace and understand that at a heartfelt level. That's what's going to change your life. And that was part of my awakening and my integration process, is to understand that.
I'm so grateful to hear this because it's giving me so much perspective on what I just shared to you and how I'm moving through this at the moment. I'm getting to see real time, like right now, the truth of what you're saying all the way. I imagine I've graduated from the 3 B's in this because I feel at the highest self-worth I've felt in a long time right now, like maybe ever in my life. And what has come for you on the other side of the 3 B's? Like where do you find your worth now? Like what has become inherently valuable to you?
Yeah. So this is a journey for me, right? The way that I'm going to answer this question is, and I'm just going to be honest in my process, right? Yeah. The one thing I can assure you is you can build it on something that can be taken away.
Yeah.
So you have to find what you're going to build your life on that cannot be taken away from you, right? And then you're getting into what I referred to as constructs, which was a huge part of my awakening to understand constructs. Constructs are a way that we make sense of things in which we don't have empirical data for. It makes us feel an understanding of an uncertain world, right? One way to answer that question by the person who acknowledged this, I'll give you an example, as a construct. And I'm in a place right now where I'm understanding constructs and the ability to choose and to adopt and to be a free thinker, not to live within the constructs that I was raised with. So I'm in a very open-minded space for the first time in my life, right? Yeah. So, the author of that particular thing would say it's wisdom, character, and love. Yeah. Those things cannot be taken from you. Your character, your wisdom, and your love, right? It's a construct that you could potentially adopt. One that I have been sitting with was a construct given to me by a therapist that I worked with. And I like it. It makes a lot of sense to me, right? And again, it's funny though, even though I can't technically say like exactly what my construct is, I am living from a place of finding value outside of those things somewhere internally, but I'm trying to figure out what that is. Does that make sense? I just know I'm experiencing it, right? So I'm not necessarily nailed this like down to a concrete framework that we'll describe, but I will. I'm learning. But basically, his construct is, Chris, your value comes from your essence. When he said essence, as one of those words, like, what does that mean? Sounds a little bit, ethereal to me. He said, I'll tell you what your essence is, Chris. The day that you were born and you were placed in your mother's arms, you had no achievements, you had no possessions, you had nothing at all but your existence. How valuable were you, Mom? In that moment, she held you in your arms. And I said, the most valuable thing in the world. He said, that's your essence. Everything that came after that, your personality, your persona, these layers, these constructs, are all just on top of your value. So your value is in your life, your essence, and who you are. So, Chris, if I were to ask you, who are you? Your response should be, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm an American, your response would be, I am who I am.
Yeah.
I am who I am. That's it. Everything on top of it. It's just layers of things that have been laid upon. It's a construct of essence. I've really been playing with that for my personal life in the sense of, is that kind of the way that I'm viewing it? Does that make sense? So again, I know we're being a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Esoteric, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're catching me on my journey. Like, I'm a year in. These are things I'm trying to figure out based on the experience I'm having. All I know as I go back to is, don't tie it to the shit that can be taken away, and figure it out. But again, I can make this simple. If someone is listening and is a Christian, I could definitely say that basically you would say that that's being Christ-centered. Building your life off of Jesus Christ and your relationship with him. That's a construct. It can't be taken away from you. Make sense?
Yeah.
So I think that each person, what I'm learning right now, needs to figure out what the answer to that question is for themselves.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what that answer is for you, and I'm still trying to determine mine. Because all my constructs, particularly theological, I have a master's degree in theology.
Wow.
I have a master's degree in Jesus, basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I was in school writing papers on all this stuff, right? It all came down, and not a bad way. And so I'm at a place of rebuilding my theology. All I know is I experienced what I experienced, and it was radical, and it pulled every construct down in my life for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So in this moment, I'm feeling into what is my construct, what's my value, and I have to agree with the essence piece. I was raised Catholic, so I imagine we relate on our understanding of at least initial worldviews, religiously speaking. And I've come back to my value is purely just being a child of God, period. Like, that's it. Is just like to use that language. But for me now, that language has evolved to being an aspect of God. I am God, so are you, so is everyone listening to this. And that doesn't mean I am the all. I am a fractal arm, esoterically speaking, of God. I am God experiencing itself through the life of Scott Hansen.
And someone say, I'm an extension of source, an extension of God. Again, it's a construct, but if that's your truth, and that's what you experience and truly believe, that can't be taken away from you.
Exactly. And if God is everything, the all that is this whole experience, I am inherently the most valuable thing as such, and so is every other human being on the planet. So is everything on the planet.
Exactly.
It's valuable just because it's here. And it's valuable because of our experience of it, because we get to be blessed by seeing, like, I'm looking out my window, the beautiful trees out here. Their value, or a sunset. What is the value of a sunset? Well, sunset just is. And by experiencing it, I can have a profound experience. I'm using that word a lot, but I can have a profound experience, just as you, in being on this podcast, have already just provided me with perspective and context that I don't even know how it will shape the rest of my life, but I'm exceedingly confident it will. And in such, your value is intangible, meaning it is priceless. And the connection that I can have with you is priceless. The way I can feel in connection with you is priceless. The brotherhood we can develop is priceless. And so I'm really grateful for this wisdom and these lessons that you're sharing with me right now, because in sitting with the decision that I have made, that I'm very happy I made, I'm very empowered in that decision. It's helping me see what is truly valuable to me right now. And those things are really simple, which are like my health, this roof over my head, the people in my life. Like, those things are just, I've had many experiences in my life where I felt like I was not going to make it. And I also empathize with your story. I had never experienced it to your extreme, but I was prescribed benzos, and it was after I had tried to commit suicide myself. I shared previously on the podcast, and went to see a psychiatrist, and they prescribed me benzos. When I specifically told the psychiatrist when I went to see them, I wasn't going to work with them if they gave me a prescription for anything, because I knew my propensity. I was an addict, and I knew my propensity is to take drugs. And he made that agreement with me, and he fucking prescribed me Adderall and benzos together, because the Adderall was taking me up, and then the benzos would help me sleep and take me down. About a month into our journey together, which was such a breach of integrity. But I don't want to go into my story too much here. I just wanted to share that to say that I relate so deeply. Like, I empathize to what you experienced with that. And I am really curious to button this up for the listener here. How can someone bridge the gap of not needing that validation without having to go through what you went through? How can someone, like, do they have to go take ayahuasca? Do they have to go do bufo? That's what I did in my experience. Or is there some way that the listener can just make that leap of faith within themselves right now?
I mean, we have to talk about where to begin. Like, let's just get practical, right?
Yeah.
The deadly combination that some people who are listening right now are experiencing is isolation plus stress.
Yeah.
That, in all my years of being in business and working with entrepreneurs and running a brotherhood for male entrepreneurs, it's isolation plus stress. So dangerous. And if you ask most men how many real friends, like confidants they have, not drinking buddies, the answer is predominantly zero.
Yeah.
You're listening right now and you're isolated and stressed. So the first step is you got to come out of isolation.
Yeah.
You have to realize you can't do this shit by yourself. I know that the masculine, perspective of, the heroes that we have looked up to, whether it be Superman or Batman or these solo heroes, bro, that's not the journey. Yeah. So step one, make the choice to stop isolating. Step two begins with radical honesty. Radical honesty of whatever that is in your life that's keeping you from getting help. And it could be lies, like in my situation that you have. It could be honesty in the fact that you need help. That you have an addiction, that you feel like you might have depression, whatever it is. And dude, I get it. Vulnerability is very, very hard. But I always love what Brené Brown says, because I'll challenge anyone listening. Brené Brown says we love the vulnerability in other people, but we hate it in ourselves.
Yeah. Wow.
So I would challenge anyone that's listening to this podcast. I would say, do you feel closer or farther away from me and my vulnerability? And you're going to say closer. And I'm going to remind you that that's going to be the truth in your experience, although your body, your mind, and your emotions say otherwise. Yeah. So, and then from there, you get help and you begin the journey inwards, right? And there's 1,000 ways in. But at the end of the day, the biggest challenge and the journey that you're going on is you're disconnected from yourself, right? Like who you are at a heart level. You're living out here in the external and in your mind and in your reason and all of that. And you don't feel, you don't value emotions. You're just a disconnected machine out there grinding and making shit happen and achieving and accomplishing and doing what everyone else is fucking doing on Instagram and the world. And by the way, America applauds for this. So this is what's so hard.
Yeah.
Men like that get applauded because they have big bank accounts. But take a look at the rest of their life. We know it's not good. And so in that, you got to go through that process of going inwards to get connected with yourself. And then to get reconnected in resonance with other people, relationships. So this is why I'm such a big believer in community and brotherhood.
Yep.
Connection to self, connection, if you're a man with other men, can help this process. And in that, there's obviously all the help of, and there's so many types of great healers, doctors, somatic workers, whatever you want to call. But also my process has been to cut through all the bullshit and through all the bullshitters, because I will tell you, there's a lot out there. And I hate when someone makes that step and gets burnt. And unfortunately, it happens too much. So the reality is to proceed with caution and who you get help from. Because unfortunately, and particularly the plant medicine world, not regulated. Anyone can go to Peru and come back 2 weeks later a self-proclaimed shaman.
Yeah.
Not regulated. The FDA doesn't regulate this shit. All you know what I'm saying? It's just not, for all of it, it's not regulated. But again, I'll remind you, it doesn't matter if you ingest something or not. It doesn't matter. Get radically honest and understand that you've got to go through this process of this wasteland in your life, which is your trauma that you've not dealt with, which is understandable that you haven't because it's fucking painful and we don't like to feel pain.
Yeah.
But bro, on the other side of that is where I'm at and what you're hearing in me. And what I'll tell you is what you will find is when you go through this process, like in mine, and everything is stripped away. Once the persona is stripped away, the pride is stripped away, the lies, the shame, the guilt, all of it, you're left with one thing. And that's your heart. And that's what the world wants to see. That's where you want to live from. That's what your wife is craving. That's what your kids are desiring. That's what the employees in your company are wanting to see from you as a leader. Just want to see your heart. But it's being blocked by all this shit. And again, don't shame yourself.
Yeah.
Because most of that shit
Yeah.
from trauma, which didn't have anything to do with you. From your mom, your dad, from a lot of those type of stuff. So I'm very big on people having mercy upon ourselves and not judging ourselves so much for these behaviors, because if you start to understand where this shit comes from, it's like you take a very more observational look at yourself. Oh, that's interesting, I behave that way, rather than identifying with every thought, emotion, and feeling as your body is it being you. Hey, prime example. My brain went into a benzos hallucination for 2 weeks, the FBI. That tells you what the brain can do. I don't identify. It's the brain does shit like that, right? It's not who I am. So learn to become the observer and take less identity in these things. They're just emotions, feelings, thoughts. But they're hard to work through. So that's what I would leave with.
Wow. Wow. The message is so beautiful. It made me tear up. And I experience your story as sacred because you've gone through hell in a lifetime and then come through the other side to find heaven. You didn't have to wait till you died and live the Christian myth of experiencing it later. You died in this lifetime, I imagine, to some degree, or a version of you, and came back to life. You said reborn at the beginning, and in that you've gone to the abyss and come back with its gifts. It's a true hero's journey all the way.
Yeah.
And one that speaks to your character, the depth of who I experience you as, because it takes really a truly radical and truly courageous human being to go through what you just went through. Because I believe at the core of my being, this is my construct, is that we create every moment of our life. And so on some level, you created that for yourself to then be able to experience how strong you truly are and to bring this medicine back. And I'm really fucking grateful for that, because I don't think a lot of people would have the courage to create something like this.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I'll remind the people listening, you're going to get there by one of two ways: choice or catastrophe.
Yeah.
You just heard the story of catastrophe. It ain't got to go to that level, man.
Yeah.
You do have the ability to make a choice and start this journey in this process and stop ignoring, numbing, and suppressing and get radically honest, because that's my hope for people. Like, don't want anyone to ever go through what I did. It was the absolute most horrific experience beyond what anything my mind could ever. People go worst case scenario, but this was beyond what my imagination could even imagine as worst case scenario. If you told me in my imagination to come up with the most wildest thing ever, it's so far beyond that.
Yeah.
It's not necessary. It's just like, that's my deal.
Yeah.
Let's get you there a little faster.
Yeah. And I imagine it's our duty as men who have spent, like, I've lived in Tulum as well. There is help and it's alternative out there. And just knowing that can help people start to open up to finding it. There's different help for every different type of thing. There are alternative modalities out there that, while they might sound woo-woo, as you said, or esoteric, they help unlock parts of the subconscious, whether it's truly spiritual or not. It gives you a new perspective, a new way to look at life that can help you see things that you might not have been seeing before, whether it's plant medicine, whether it's even just a coach. If you haven't experienced somebody sitting across from you and listening to your experience in a way that's not, like some men are even scared to get psychiatry and things like that. Like, I don't want my story of help or of a psychologist to make anybody shy away from that. But basically, this is to say that there is help out there, and it's most likely not pills, and it's most likely not a doctor. And with that, I would love to ask you, what's next for you on this journey? Is there some way that you would like the listener to interact with you, or are you just sharing this story as a gift right now?
Yeah. So I'm not on social media. Like, a lot of that stuff is just no longer necessary for my life. But what is next for me, and this is a story about big pharma and benzodiazepines. It's a story about, plant medicine. It's a story about authenticity and radical honesty. But the beautiful bow on the end of it all was, in this process, I lost the brotherhood I had and to shut it down.
Yeah.
I wasn't functioning. Yeah. And coming out of what I did, it took a long time to figure out what I was meant to do after all this. Yeah. And what has been so beautiful is that this is now a story about brotherhood. Some of those core men that were there, literally, in 1 week, I'm going to be in Puerto Rico for the first time, face to face, with some of those men that were with me in Honduras when I tried to kill myself, coming back together to build a brotherhood. And if you want to encapsulate it all, the original brotherhood was called multipliers, and the new brotherhood is called simplifiers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Simplifiers brotherhood.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So
what a story of redemption, my friend. What a story of alchemy.
Entrepreneurial men.
Wow. So is that something that the listener can participate with you in?
Yeah, we're building a community now. So, if you're asking directly, basically it's a community for male entrepreneur business owners who are doing a minimum of about $1 million a year in revenue. And again, that's just my tribe. It's who I know. Yeah. There's a certain set of business challenges and problems that come from that. And we're building a small group of men again. And for the first time in my life, I'm going to pour my heart, my soul into one thing and play into focus. My buddy just told me this today. I love this. An acronym for focus. Follow one course until successful.
Wow.
That was really good.
That's perfect.
But I'm in a season of focus now, and I'm going to pour into this. So, that's what I'm going to be doing. And we'll definitely be bringing some guys on into the community that we're doing. So, but first and foremost, I've been wanting to tell a story for a long time.
Yeah.
Because I wish I had known.
Yeah.
Out of all my network, 100 and something people that were involved, even doctors, so forth. No one knew what was going on. And at least, at minimum, if I had just known I was in a benzo's withdrawal, it would have alleviated a lot of the pain, but didn't know what was happening and didn't know what to do. And I have a buddy that went through the same thing, and we felt it important to tell the story because someone might hear this, and this just connects so many dots for them and change their life.
Yeah.
And that's my hope.
Well, that's my prayer with this as well. Chris, I can't tell you the honor it is to get to be the first podcast that you're sharing this on. And I can see the gifts it's given you, and I can't wait to just see what this radical level of experience is going to blossom into in your life. And I am really honored, and I hope the listener is too, to get to hear this type of radical human experience. So thank you for being on the podcast. And to you, listener, thank you for listening and being here. And if you find this story helpful, or you know someone in your life that is struggling, please send this to them, because this story is a life-changing story. And it's one that more people need to hear. So with that, I am so grateful, Chris. Thank you. And to you, listener, we'll see you on the next episode of the Hard for Life podcast. Have a beautiful day.